Hey, what's going on? Ryan here with Intersection Records, and I wanted to talk about Jerry Garcia today, kind of the life and times and a little overview of his life. Jerry was a complex man. Jerry, first and foremost, was a true musician, a lover of music, somebody who, if he wasn't in the Grateful Dead, he would be in some other band. If he hadn't have died at 53, he would still be playing music. And, unfortunately, we know what happened to Jerry in the end and the limitations he had as a human being, I guess. Jerry was born in 1942. He ends up playing over 4,000 concerts between his Grateful Dead band and his solo projects. Recorded over 20 studio albums. The Grateful Dead has now released 167 live albums over the years. Rock and Roll Hall of Famer, leader of one of the most influential bands of all time. I mean, the Grateful Dead, as we experienced this weekend in San Francisco, is still influencing music, young musicians, older musicians, fans all over the world. And that style of music, the improvisational style, which he did not create, but certainly helped spurn on. He talks about people like Charlie Christian being influences on him, and Django Reinhardt being improvisational influences, and Bill Monroe's bluegrass band, the one that featured Del McCoury, and people like Art Tatum, the great piano player. Jerry would say things like, when I wanted to feel small, I'd listen to Art Tatum, or I'd play Art Tatum for other musicians just to show how great he was. They sold over 35 million records. And think about the thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of recorded material that fans recorded. The Grateful Dead spurned on and invented the concept of fans being able to come in with audio equipment and recording these concerts, because Jerry never felt like he owned his material. Once he wrote it, it was for other people, and Jerry was very humble in that way. He played rock and folk and bluegrass and Americana and rock and roll and jazz rock and jam rock and psychedelic rock. He was a master of any stringed instrument, from an acoustic guitar, which he was amazing on, electric guitar, which was his main instrument, but he also played the banjo and the pedal steel. He plays the great hook in Teach Your Children. Just what makes the Crosby, Stills, and Nash's song Teach Your Children kind of pop is the part that Jerry came in on the steel and did that. Music was his great love. This is from a quote from his biographer, Blair Jackson. Music was his great love, and it's not that everybody else came second to the music, but the music seemed to come first, is what his biographer said. He also said this, while working on the biography, he was amazed by how many people said the exact same things about Jerry. People that he interviewed said the exact same thing. They said he was the smartest person that they ever knew, and that he lit up a room like no one else they'd ever met before. John Perry Barlow, the lyricist for Bob Weir, said this: there was some sort of holy power to his charisma, and it radiated large. He was in some ways a godlike being. Barlow also said, a lonely prophet on his own frontier, and definitely knew what it was like to be an outcast and never felt like an incast. Jerry was very humble about his own music. He never felt like he was very good. He felt like, when asked how he would want to be remembered in a 1985 interview I listened to, he said, basically paraphrasing this, I wouldn't want to burden somebody by having to remember me at all. And that it would embarrass him to have to be remembered. He didn't feel like he was worth remembering. He said in that same interview, he was surprised that anybody would stay long enough at a concert to get through the first song. Obviously he knew by the 70s and beyond that there was a fan base, and he knew that it was special. But long into his career, he didn't understand the appeal. He had to. Donna Jean Gaucho says this. He had an ability to take you to a higher place, whether it was in the music or if you're sitting down and having a conversation with him. He also told his biographer that psychedelics were the most important thing that ever happened to him. They presented a world of possibilities that he had never imagined before. Jerry obviously liked experimenting with psychedelics, and unfortunately experiencing harder drugs in the 70s and 80s and beyond. Jerry said we were always about 90 degrees out of the wake, no matter what it was. Meaning, he never felt like they fit in. He never felt like they were in the in crowd, and that they were always skewed off at a 90 degree angle out of what was popular, because the Grateful Dead didn't follow trends. Yeah, they played some Americana music. Yeah, they played some old-time rock and roll music, but they were doing their own thing. Bill Graham once said, they're not the best at what they do. They're the only ones that do what they do. Donna Jean also said this. He would always put himself in the position of being the giver, and he gave every time. I never saw him cut somebody off or shoo them away. A fan would come. He'd always give them time. He would have that time for that person and not treat them like they were bothering him, like a lot of rock stars did. Blair Jackson said while working on his biography, he was amazed, again, how many people just had so many nice things to say about Jerry. Yet he was incredibly insecure, said Barlow. He never went on stage without experiencing stage fright. Big Steve Parrish, his roadie and great friend and confidant and bodyguard, essentially, said he identified with the cowardly lion from Wizard of Oz very much. He was a Leo. He was born on August 1st, 1942. A Leo, a sign of the lion. But sometimes his courage deserted him. Jerry was born in San Francisco on August 1st, 1942. His parents named him. He was born Jerome John Garcia, named after Jerome Kern, who was a composer. His mother was a nurse and a pianist. His father was a young musician named Jose Ramon Garcia. They married in 1935, had one son, and then in 1942 had Jerry. When Jerry was 4 years old, his brother was cutting wood with a hatchet and chopped off the middle finger on Jerry's right hand. It was attached a little bit, and by the time they got to the hospital, there was no way to save it, so they had to cut that finger off. The next year, at age 5, the family was on a family fishing trip up in Northern California, and Jerry's father slipped, fell into the water, was swept away by the water, and got pinned under a rock, and Jerry witnessed his father drowned to death. His mother then shuts down emotionally. They never wanted to talk about it. He said he felt excluded from that conversation about his father's death. Think about a 5-year-old child seeing that. He ends up being raised essentially by his grandparents, who just really didn't. They made sure there was food on the table and there was a bed to sleep in, but they were unsupervised. Jerry was completely unsupervised from a small child through the rest of his youth and growing up. He was a big reader. He loved the sci-fi horror comics of the time. In 1957, at the age of 15, he was turned on to two things: music and pot. And his mother bought him an accordion for his 15th birthday, and he quickly pawned that for a guitar. And the rest is history. He spent hours alone teaching himself how to play guitar. He was an introvert in his music, and wasn't playing outside with kids, wasn't playing ball, wasn't doing that. He was woodshedding as a young man and teenager on the guitar. For reasons we don't know, in 1960, he decides to join the Army, probably knowing that he wasn't going to work out. He AWOL'd 8 times in 9 months, and finally they asked him, "Hey, do you want us to let you out of this?" And he said, "Yes, very much so." And when he gets out, he moves down to Palo Alto, California, down by where Stanford is, a few miles south of San Francisco. And there's a movement, this beat movement and bohemian movement down there. And he is playing with people. He meets people like Robert Hunter, who ends up, they have a jug band together. He meets people like Bill Kreutzmann and Phil Lesh, who was an older kind of jazz guy. He meets a young Bob Weir and Pigpen, and ultimately they form the Warlocks. The Warlocks are kind of more of a folky band. And then, of course, the Beatles hit with Hard Day's Night, and the world changes in 1965. And by December of 1965, they do their first show as the Grateful Dead. And the rest is history. They say that Jerry opened up a Funk and Wagnall dictionary, opened it up to the page that said Grateful Dead, and they made their name that. Here's what the Grateful Dead term means. Referring to a folk tale where someone, often a wanderer, helps bury a deceased person who couldn't afford it and is later aided by the spirit of that person. This resonated with band members who were also exploring themes of life, death, and interconnectedness. Obviously, the hippie movement's now going on in San Francisco. They moved back to San Francisco. They live in one house together in Haight-Ashbury, and Jerry's the focal point of that person. Make no mistake, Jerry is the leader. Jerry is who they call Captain Trips. Jerry is the focal point in the band, and there is no Grateful Dead without Jerry Garcia, period. By the way, thanks for all the new subscribers who've been subscribed to my channel recently. Thank you so much. Please like these videos and share them if you want to, and subscribe if you want to. Jerry said this about LSD. It presented a world of possibilities, and Jerry took full advantage of those possibilities. LSD revealed things to him. Ken Kesey had these tripping parties or acid tests at places like the Avalon Ballroom. And the band, the Grateful Dead, was the house band for these events. And it allowed them to express their free expression of experimental and improvisational rock. Jerry's had been married and had a child in 1963, but they're not living. Sarah, his wife, and child are not living with them in Haight-Ashbury. And by the time 1967 comes around, Jerry has divorced Sarah and met Mountain Girl, Caroline Adams, who is known as Mountain Girl. She was from Poughkeepsie, New York. And really, that started a 25-year on and off again relationship, probably his soulmate. But Jerry was never able to fully commit to a woman. Although not traditionally handsome, he was irresistible to women. Barlow says this, he was attractive to women and others because he had this huge force to him, this presence that was bigger than the Rock of Gibraltar. Donna Jean says he was a magnet. How can you not be attracted to a magnet? He had a very strong presence, a strong man, a strong presence, and that attracts. They played the Monterey Pop Festival. They were sandwiched between the Who's debut in the United States, blowing up all their instruments and smashing them. The Grateful Dead played, and then Jimi Hendrix basically made his triumph return, return to the United States, and burns his guitar. And they kind of forgotten about performance in between as the Grateful Dead. They also played Woodstock and had kind of a mess of an experience there, trying to escape electrocution. But they did perform there, of course. Miles Davis, in his biography, said about Jerry that he could talk to Jerry about music, and he respected Jerry Garcia. And if you know anything about Miles Davis didn't like anybody. Jerry was surprised by the success of the Grateful Dead in the 70s. Again, he didn't think much of his own playing. He would occasionally listen to tapes like, oh, I was kind of good that night. So he could understand when he was good, but never thought he was good, never thought maybe he was playing well at the time. Again, the culture of this Deadhead thing starts becoming a reality in the 70s, and fans taping shows and trading tapes, self-sustained marketing by the fans who now, after Jerry's done with the music live, says that other people own it. The music belongs to the people. Jerry never wanted to control people, and Jerry never wanted to be controlled. Jerry was the very epicenter of the Dead universe. He was, again, Captain Trips. He was who he was without trying to be. That's what Donna Jean says. He was powerful without trying to be powerful. He just had an aura about him. He moved people, said Steve Parrish. Pigpen dies in 73. The rock and roll lifestyle took his life. Jerry's got his Jerry band. Jerry's got Old in the Way, which is a bluegrass band. Jerry's got Legion of Mary, which is my favorite offshoot with Merle Saunders. All these bands are big in their own right. Jerry's touring constantly with the Grateful Dead, but when he's not touring, he's on the road with these other entities. He leaves Mountain Girl for Deborah Coons in 75, and drugs, unfortunately, are moving into his life. Cocaine, and then smoking what they called Persian, which is heroin. He had a strong will, and it's amazing he was able to survive as long as he did doing what he was doing, says Jonna Jean. He never thought he was worthy of fan admiration. He didn't think he deserved it, and he never understood it. He didn't think that he deserved it and never understood it. And that's a big thing. Jerry wasn't able to go to the movie theater. Jerry wasn't able to go see concerts. One of the last concerts he went to was the Dire Straits, like in 1983. He wasn't big into modern guitar players because he didn't see a lot of value in their playing. People like Eddie Van Halen. He got it to a certain extent, but he didn't get it on a musical level. He slipped deeper and deeper into cocaine and heroin in the 80s. Fans would leave drugs on stage, offerings to their gods. In 1985, he got busted for smoking heroin in his car in Golden Gate Park. And now what was a private addiction is now made public. Everybody knew he did LSD and pot, but the heroin was a deep, dark secret. It wasn't anymore. Barlow says this: he was in terrible shape, smoking unfiltered Camels and unfiltered Pall Malls, eating junk food and never exercising. An anti-health diet. He ballooned up in the 80s, unfortunately. He had diabetes. His legs were swollen. At 43 in 1986, he slipped into a diabetic coma and almost died right then and there. When he finally woke up from this diabetic coma, he didn't know anybody's names. He didn't know his friends' names. He didn't know how to play guitar anymore. He said that it was like taking a bunch of file folders and throwing them on the floor and getting them all mixed up. That's what Blair Jackson says. He had to teach himself how to play guitar again. But what happens is remarkable from 1987 to like 1990 is that he does relearn how to play guitar. And he does have a rebirth with the band that is pretty much a second act, a second golden era. Ben and Jerry's name's an ice cream after him called Jerry Garcia, right? Touch of Grey hits the charts. It goes to number 3. They have an MTV video. They have a couple of them, I think. He forms a partnership that's been a long partnership since the 60s with Davis Grisman and puts out several bluegrass and folk albums. He leaves Mountain Girl again in 98 or in 88, and Mountain Girl and his daughter look out the window, and there's a woman in the driveway with a baby in her hand. And it's Menashe Matheson, his new 27-year-old deadhead girlfriend, and her baby. So now he got a 4th daughter. Jerry's health is a major problem by end of 90 into 91. They have an intervention. He leaves the intervention, but later that night checks himself into rehab. And really, for the next 4 years, he battles to stay clean. There's flashes of brilliance within the 92, 93, 94, and even a little bit in 95. He writes songs like The Days Between with Robert Hunter, but it's never fully recorded properly because they can't get back into the studio because Jerry's got these problems and health problems. He turns 53 on August 1st, 1995, and unfortunately, 7 days later, on the 8th of August, 1995, Jerry Garcia dies. We love you, Jerry. I wanted to kind of put this together and talk about your life, and I'm going to do something else on the day that it's the 30th. Thanks a lot again for subscribing. Check out my channel. Peace out. See you.